To give a short little summary of all the stuff we said earlier. We got T Ford on staff, which...
By staff, meaning we're not paying him anything.
By staff, he's working for the Lord.
Yeah.
As they say in the churches.
With fellowship and books.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will give you the hookup on books.
So we have a bunch of, some new stuff with the Classic Cast. Same old stuff, just recording it.
Video recording.
It's
now going to be on video on YouTube.
Lord willing, to be on
Maybe
YouTube.
Does Spotify do video podcasts,
Yes.
or is it just a special thing for their people, like their?
I'm wondering that, but you can upload like a MOV file. Anyways,
Okay.
we should have video next time that this is recorded. Which here we are. This is why we're wearing what we're wearing. Actually, it's not. We just talked about beforehand how we're wearing.
I thought
the
about
exact same thing.
what should I wear, but it was too late because I was already on my way here.
Yeah, I woke up at 4:40 this morning.
That's when you woke up when you text me?
Yes.
That's unusual.
Yes, I know. I don't know. My alarm does weird stuff on this dinosaur phone. But anyways, we also got T Ford in the background doing some video editing.
Whoa, welcome aboard.
This is the second time we're saying welcome aboard because he didn't click record the first 10 minutes that we were talking. I'm not going to let him slide on that. T Ford is making the whole process easier.
Well, not easier, even better, I was
about to say that too.
I would say.
Let's just say efficient, because under efficient, you got easier and better at the same time, all in the same word. He's going to be looking up some stuff for us, editing, doing all the hard stuff that Danny and I are not good at. So welcome aboard, T Ford.
Thanks, I'm super pumped.
This was a couple things here, just by way of extended appreciation. Look, we're not trying to make a name for ourselves. That's not why we're doing this podcast. That's not why we're doing it on video. That's not why we're putting it on YouTube now. That's still not the motivation. We're still just having fun. We're still just rolling with it. But I want to give a shout out to my mom, my nanny, as they haven't gotten any love on here in a while. But also, we've gotten some great feedback from some listeners. We've gotten some really good feedback, some really encouraging feedback messages on certain episodes being sent to us, just letting us know how it's impacted their life, how encouraging it's been, how they've listened to the whole series, recommended it to their friends. And so that's really fueled us to take the next steps, level up a little bit, put a little more investment into it. And so we appreciate all of you who are listening. I bring that up to say that Trinity is one of our super fans. And so that's why we decided to bring him on the team.
Yeah, yeah.
And providentially, he and his dad for a while wanted to start a podcast. And they figured out all of the, the technical aspects of it. Not like that he's a professional podcast producer, but he figured out a lot of the, logistics of, what it takes to capture, upload, all that sort of stuff. Where you and I were just kind of, hey, Google, how do you do this? Oh, yeah. Let's use that. Let's put it together.
Oh, this works. Let's upload
so
that.
we were doing what Trinity and his dad have yet to get off the ground. I'm still going to hold out for that podcast.
Hey, man, maybe one day we'll see.
But they spent time figuring out stuff that you and I never took the time to do. So, So, big thanks to Trin. And big thanks to he and his dad never actually doing a podcast.
Yeah. Thankful for that. Because now we got them. Next thing, too, by the time that this episode is being released, we're probably still doing the giveaway for Lex Rex. So, Canon Press has given us a copy to give out for a giveaway. Just their small little token of being a part of this. Because we looked at this, and you look at the book, and it says Christian Heritage Series. That, along with a few sets and series that other publishers have, goes perfectly along with what we're doing at
Yeah.
Classic Cast. That's the whole point, reading Christian heritage stuff, reading all the cool classics. And we decided, and we brought up the fact that just because it's big and just because it's a book and just because it's written by a Puritan doesn't mean that it's a classic. But there are classics out there that people have totally forgotten about, in our circles even, that, man, it would be so much better if they sat down at night to read these books instead of watching whatever it is that they typically watch. There's nothing on TV at night. There's nothing on TV ever. Or even their kids reading these sorts of books. So we're doing a giveaway. The giveaway's in the advertisement or the announcement at the very beginning of this episode. Check that out. You could also check out our social media pages that Trinity is running now that kind of keep up the coverage of everything we got going on with this. Anyways, D2, we talked beforehand. I asked you the question if you realized we have a new governor here in Arkansas. And the said governor has been dropping some bombs, apparently.
The only one I know about, I haven't been following her that close yet. The only one I know about is that Latinx isn't allowed in government documents.
The white folk can no longer imperialize the Spanish community.
That's exactly right. Look, I grew up in a small town called Ferris, Texas. I was a minority growing up. So town is 70 to 80% Hispanic population. Dude, if I started calling, back in the day, if I started calling
Latinx,
if I started saying Latins or Latinx,
you're getting punched in the face.
Or I wouldn't have survived.
No.
I wouldn't have made it to college. I would have never had a wife, never had children. It just wouldn't have happened.
They take pride in gender in their language.
Well,
Whoever started that?
It's exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's their culture, man. I mean, why are you going to change somebody's language?
And for an American to say, we are going to change your entire... That's not just a small change.
I guarantee you, a Mexican or a Hispanic person did not come up with this.
Not at all. No. You got La Hacienda. You got El Sombrero. There's gender.
Are you just naming Mexican restaurants in town, or what?
You got, yeah. I mean, I know a little bit of Spanish based off of the 20 Mexican restaurants we have here in Conway. Anyway, that is so strange. It's so imperialistic for us to say, you know what? We don't like your language, and we're assuming you don't like your language either. So we're going to change your entire language.
Yeah. There's something fundamentally wrong with your language. You got to change it.
Here's what we're talking about. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has taken office and dropping elbows on folks. She's signed up to, last time I checked, 8 executive orders, all seemingly to be great executive orders, stopping government overreach, stop freezing all government hires, and whatever the whole process, government big spending. The other thing that she put a stop to, rest in peace, to critical race theory in public schools.
Oh, really?
Yes, which I thought this was so funny. This is how you know that people are trying to sneak in critical race theory in the most diabolical way. When she did that, people on the news anchors were like, "Oh, it's in colleges and it's in upper level courses, but it's just so strange that she stopped that in the public schools. It's not like they're teaching that there." It's like, okay, that's how I know you want it in the public schools. And that's how I know that the fact that she did that offends you. You don't like it.
Right.
But here's, not to get political.
No. You've already done it. What do you mean not to?
I'm trying to catch up to you from the last episode where on 3 separate occasions you said, I'm not about to get political, but here's a 20-minute monologue of politics. Here,
Hey, we got to check the record. They weren't 20 minutes.
Here,
That's the only part I'll deny about that.
here's the whole reason why I bring that up.
I knew you'd have a creative tie-in.
It all has to do with segues. She says this in her inaugural speech. Government must be the servant of the people.
Bam.
The people never to be servants of the government. Has she been reading Lex Rex?
She did. I hope she dropped the mic after that.
Just drop the mic and walk off.
She just
hitting the nail on the head. Now, here's how she'd have done it better, though. Government is the servant of God and the people. I'm not being nitpicky.
Yeah.
Not being nitpicky.
Yeah.
But if we're coming in and asserting our authority in the public realm, that half of the American population would have died of a heart attack if she would have said that.
Here's the thing, though. That's what, not to get political, but
get the timer on how long he is political.
Here's the thing, though, is I think that we should go back to the American public would have probably, there probably would have been headlines about that if that was part of her speech. But I think most of Arkansas, the vast majority of Arkansas, would have loved it. They would have appreciated it. And so that's where I think we need to get back to doing politics. If you're running for governor, Arkansas is the only thing that matters. You're not caring about what. You've got to have friends, you've got to have allies, but you're not writing your speech for the national headlines. You're writing your speech for, the state of Arkansas, not worried about what they're going to write about you, in the national headlines. But, that's not a criticism of Huckabee Sanders per se, Governor Sanders per se, but it's just going back to kind of like state, kind of like local, state politic priority. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
In that timer.
That was only a 3 minute or so. So I'm pretty fired up about that. And I think if somebody were to take office, if somebody would take president and just come in asserting their Christian authority, most people would probably like that too.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm always in the minority of discussions here. Like, people really think that there's a kind of like a silent majority or less silent majority these days. I've seriously questioned that.
Question what specifically?
That it would be most people in the country. I think at best it'd be, 50%.
That
yeah,
talking about God and stuff.
Yeah.
I think the benefits of talking about God publicly like that.
I'm not saying don't do it because 50% wouldn't like it. I'm just saying that.
Well, no, I'm saying that even the people who don't believe in God, the benefits to a society for them,
right?
Because they have someone in power who believes in the triune God, they would end up liking it. They would secretly,
man,
at least.
You've been reading a lot of Lex Rex, man. You're getting very optimistic about.
I try to stay optimistic.
Don't be turning post mill on us.
That's the thing. That's the other thing too. The other
day
thing too is
day one. He's in here picking fights.
Yeah. When you start talking good about politics as a Christian, people start saying, "Are you a post mill? When did you get post?" I'm a post mill too, brother. It's like, no, I'm not post mill. I'm just a fired up all mill. Why can we not be? So, anyways,
I'm not getting into that on this episode.
The king,
I'm thankful for my post millennial brothers.
We should have had Sarah Huckabee Sanders on this episode because the thing that she said in her inaugural speech.
Look, I'm sure. I mean, she's not busy or anything this week. I'm sure if we would have asked.
Think we could call her up right now?
She'd be the classic cast. 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I'll be there.
I'll be there. She's got bedhead when she shows up. She's half asleep. I couldn't imagine. Because it's almost like she read what we're covering right now on page 188, just to take a swan dive right into it. He says in assertion number 3, And just to back up, 188 is under question 17, which is whether or not the prince have properly the fiduciary or ministerial power of a tutor, husband, patron, minister, head, master of a family, not of a lord or dominator. He says this under assertion number 3, the king is more properly a sort of patron to defend the people and a minister or public and honorable servant. For he is the minister of God to you for good. He is the commonwealth's servant objectively, because all the king's service as he is king is for the good, safety, peace, and salvation of the people. And in this, he is a servant. So someone gives an objection. And someone may object, he is the servant of God, therefore he is not the people's servant, which would disagree with the most revered Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But he answers to that, and he says it follows not. In other words, just because he's the servant of God, Romans chapter 13, verse 4, does not mean he is not the servant of God's people, of the land, or even just those who are not in the covenant community of God. It doesn't follow. He says this, because all the services the king, as king, performs to God are acts of royalty and acts of royal service as terminated on the people, or acts of their sovereign Lord. And this proves to be that their sovereign is to be their servant, the people's servant and watchman. Again, the governor of Arkansas is getting this and is making good laws just by that one little understanding, that one little principle that she sees. Government must be the servant of the people. The people are never to be servants of the government. If you get that, the direction that your political career, the direction that your leadership goes is starkly different from the alternative.
Yeah, the main point in this chapter is the royalist, as Rutherford keeps referring to them as in opposing them. They're making the argument that a king is like a husband or father to the nation. And so really what he's starting to break down and point out is that, okay, and they're using that to show, to in essence say that that essentially there's absolute authority, that this person is absolute authority, and that you can't, although this person may treat you wrong, you may have a poor father, but you can't change who your father is what the case that they're trying to essentially lay out, and he's objecting to. What they reveal in the process is that they consider it's not like that they're considering that there's a law over husbands and fathers, and they start mixing up what a husband and father actually is to do. So when I was reading this, I was coming to the conclusion, and this makes so much sense, is that their issue isn't just about kingly authority. Their issue is about authority in general. That they don't even view the role of husband and father accurately. And I think Rutherford clearly makes a point, at least in the illustration of a husband. It's just like, yeah, but the woman freely joined herself to him, in the beginning. And a father, yeah, you can't change who your father is, but they also talk about a tutor. And he was just like, yeah, as a child, you might not be able to change who your tutor is, but then you can either accept or reject their teaching when you're older, or accept or reject them once you reach of age. And so he's just kind of breaking down their analogies, saying, well, the king's like a husband or a father, being the head of a nation as like a husband is head of a household, or being a tutor. And he even makes the point that at least in the tutor-child relationship, like teacher-child relationship, it was like the child had a father that chose that tutor for him. So it's not like these people getting put into positions immediately or arbitrarily, and they're not unchangeable. They're not unchangeable, and ultimately, the point he's really trying to make is that there's no absolute authority or intrinsic authority in them, but it's a stewardship that the right perspective to have is that God has given me my wife, God has given me my children to be a faithful steward. So these are people that, quote, God has loaned to me, or is putting them in my care, but they're ultimately not mine. They're ultimately God's. And that's the perspective Rutherford's interjecting here. Is just like, hey, you've got a stewardship here given to you by God, for the people. And you've got a responsibility to both. And so that's what he's calling a fiduciary authority. It's a loaned authority.
What does fiduciary mean? I looked it up. Could you read to us the definition of it?
It's, you can Google. I mean, do you already have it? No. Yeah, Google it. But it's the same type of language used in the parable of the talents. So it's like the principle there is stewardship. It's a authority to be stewarded. It's not intrinsic. It's not your own authority that you're acting on.
Yeah.
It's not your own capital you're investing. You're investing somebody else's capital. You're executing someone else's authority.
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
All right, it says of or relating to a duty of acting in good faith with regard to the interest of another.
Yeah, so
the king,
in that case, it would be you're acting in the interest of God and the people.
Right. And in good interest of them. And that implies also service. Service to people.
Well, yeah, not does it just imply service. Rutherford's specific about it. And I think we hear a lot about servant leadership these days, but this is what it's talking about. It's not leadership that doesn't take charge. It's not leadership that's like this weak leadership. Some people can get that a little mixed up, but it's the perspective. It's the perspective on leadership. It's like, I still use the term and teach servant leadership, even though it's been, kind of criticized as of late.
People being kind of nitpicky. Let's be honest.
Right. But it's understanding your position rightly. It's okay. I'm the head of my house. I'm a husband and a father. But I execute that role not, okay, how do I use these people for my good and benefit? But rather, yes, I'm the head of the household, but my responsibility is to execute that leadership for the good of those who are under my care. And so that means I have to make sacrifices. We come to some situation, where inflation's rising, where we don't have, our dollar isn't stretching as far as it used to. Okay, well, I'm going to cut from my budget first, my personal things that I personally spend money on before I cut from, something that my wife or kids need or use. That's servant leadership. That's sacrificial leadership. We need to cut our budget, but let me look at where we're spending money. Can I cut stuff before them so that they're not sacrificing for me, I'm sacrificing for them. Yeah. Simple, silly illustration, but that's kind of the perspective.
Yeah, I don't have any qualms with the term servant leader other than the fact that it's redundant. But I think redundancy is good sometimes because to your point and to Rutherford's point, if he is the leader of the community, it implies that he's the servant to the community. It's like, I'm the leader of my wife. Therefore, I must serve her.
Right.
How could you get away from serving someone that you're leading?
Yeah, and if you came to, a brother and said, "Hey, we're having trouble in my marriage," it was like, "What's what's going on?" And it was shown that you're not serving your wife. It would be right for him to say, you're not leading in your home. Because that's not leadership. That's not.
Bada boom. Let's break out some.
That's not leadership.
Classic cast marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Can I go on a rant on this?
I mean,
throw the law pass.
Do we?
Throw the law pass.
Since when do we ask permission for rants on here?
Here's the thing. I've noticed this in the Reformed community. You have good gender specificity. The husband is the leader. The wife is the submissive one who follows the lead of her husband. You can see this.
Just got canceled.
Well, but you can notice this. Notice the woman who is having a harder time to submit to her husband. Not all the time. Not all the time. I'm not going to speak hyperbolically. Not all the time. A lot of the times you look at the husband and the husband is not serving her.
Yeah.
Look at the ladies who are really good at being biblically submissive to their husbands, and they feel strong and confident, and they're not like a withered flower, but they're just a big tree, bearing their fruit in submissiveness. Look at their husband's in the background sweating, doing all the stuff for the family to make it easier for the wife, and how hard he works, how well he loves his wife. And so behind every submissive woman is the servant man leading his family. And when that's not the case, there's a breakdown in requirement. There's a lot of, there's less oil in the engine, if you will. So there's a lot of friction build up, making it hard for some piston to fire off like it needs to. But that's a rabbit chasing thing, exactly to your point.
Yeah.
So Rutherford's point on this, at the same time, though, if a king is one or the other, back to our first question, if he's a lord and dominator or if he is a fiduciary tutor husband, there's still differences between the language of husband and king, because the king is not like a husband, or in this case, a king is not like a father. Yeah. He would say univocally. Now he's using scholastic language. Let's give credit for where credit is due. So it's not apples to apples when we're using the language of king being like a father.
Right.
Because there's differences.
Right. That's where he's making the distinction.
He says that the king is a head of the commonwealth only metaphorically, which is kind of we're talking about the head of something now, like the husband is the head of the wife, the father is the head of the family. Christ is the head of the new covenant. Adam is the head of the old covenant. Is the king the head of the commonwealth? And Rutherford says only by a borrowed speech in a political sense, because he rules, commands, directs the whole political body, and all its operations and functions. But he is not univocally and essentially the head of the commonwealth.
Right.
But you still got to get, as we're talking about now, you got to get step one right first. He's not a lord in the univocal language. He's actually, or similes, he's actually more like a husband. father,
Yeah.
servant leader. But when it comes to being in the literal sense, he is not literally exactly like a father, like a husband, like a head of a certain sort of body of people.
Yeah.
And he gives us several reasons as to why it isn't, which I thought these reasons were actually pretty funny, pretty cute. The head is I just said cute.
No. Rutherford.
I'll
just
edit
called-
that out.
Huh?
I'll edit that out.
Okay, thank you.
Rutherford is rolling in his grave right now.
The head natural is not made a head by the free election and consent of arms, shoulders, legs, toes, fingers. The king is made king only by the free election of his people. So it's not like, so using the language of a body, you don't elect the head elects you. You know, Christ is the head of the church. We didn't elect Christ to be the head of the church. Everything flows from the head, and we've already established up to this point that the king doesn't elect himself.
Right.
He's consented to by the people and authorized by the people.
Yeah.
And he is the servant.
Real quick, just going back to Rutherford's biblical examples of, David was anointed king, but he didn't become king until the people installed him as king at Hebron. So
Exactly.
the people were used as instruments of God to make him king.
Exactly. And this is one great thing about the American government. I just want to put that out there and say,
America.
I want to put it out and say how thankful I am for the design of American government. I mean, we both are. Which, by the way, to our point last week, Philip Scaff, the great church historian.
I thought it was Shaft, but okay.
That's the debate. It's like Augustine, Augustine, which is it? Schaff. Philip Schaff writes a book on church and state in America. Church and state in the United States. It's $8 on Logos.
I got to read that.
Yeah. Anyways, one of the great designs of American government is this, that the king may die and the people aren't going to die. Whereas if the head dies on a body, like if Lord forbid, if your head were to die,
I hope Ariel doesn't listen to this.
Your body's going to die.
And the odds are pretty high that she's never going to hear that, though.
The same thing with the American government. Lord forbid if a person in power in our government were to die, we have something in process already, in the system, not missing a beat. Someone else is taking over number one spot because we recognize this as a government, that the president is not the head in this univocal sense of the Commonwealth. And that's a built-in feature to our system.
To an extent, the monarchy has that with the secession. It just doesn't work as smoothly because you may have like a 12-year-old king, theoretically. So then there's some, again, I'm not an expert on government in general, but just my knowledge of history, you had issues like that crop up, and then there's kind of like a political, some political gaming there for who gets stewardship of the throne until this person can come of age or whatever. But Rutherford is making that same point. He says, but not even about if someone just got sick and died. He takes it further, remembering that, this book is, this book in large part is an argument for making a case that there are times where a people should oppose their rulers. And so that's what he dips into here. He says,
man, you're jumping in what I was going to jump into. Law pass off the hizzy.
This or that king is not the adequate and total political head. This or that king, is not the adequate and total political head of the Commonwealth, and therefore, though you cut off a political head, there is nothing done against nature. However, he says, he goes on to say, I conceive a society of reasonable men cannot lack governors. And so what is he saying there? He's saying that, okay, if you remove this or that king, you haven't, you haven't done any wrong. That's permissible. There's not this one person that if you cut off him, if you remove him, then the country can't, the nation, the Commonwealth can't survive. But his point is saying you can't remove, in his context, you can't remove the office of the king, or it does. So, and that's the biblical argument. Christians are not anarchists. Christians are not anti-government. Christians are very pro-government. And that's what Rutherford's saying here, is that although you can oppose a king, you can't oppose the office of the king. Mm-hmm. And then that's important. That's important because the next couple chapters, he's going to make a differentiation between the power and office of a king.
Yeah.
Because the natural rebuttal to that is, to oppose a particular king is to oppose the office of the king. And Rutherford's going to smash that.
Yeah, because there's a distinction between that.
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
Yeah, so he's saying if you've got a bad king, cut him off, get a good king, but you can't reject a king altogether.
Yeah.
A king in general.
Yeah. And so reading the quote that's right before what you say, for Rutherford to make the defense that the king is not univocally the head of the Commonwealth, he says natural members should not or cannot resist the head, though the hand may pull a tooth out of the head, which is no small violence to the head. But the members of a political body may resist the political head. So you can resist the political head and the society still survive. But on the flip side, as you just said, you still can't conceive of a society without some sort of government. So which is why we can say syllogistically or metaphorically, a king is the head of a commonwealth, not univocally. Metaphorically, because it's good to have this person in that office over a people, leading them,
right,
guiding them, but it's not apples to apples,
right,
because the people can resist that king. And you're exactly right. Anytime we say anything about a government that may be viewed as criticism, that doesn't mean that we want to do away with government altogether. Right. Now, right. But I will say this. This is why I don't call myself a conservative anyways, but would for sure not call myself a far-right conservative, because it's ironic.
It's because you're a lib.
You outed me. No, you didn't out me at that. There's people that are going to misunderstand that. He didn't out me as liberal, because I'm not.
Cool.
But
the whole, it's now revealed the whole venture of this podcast is for me to convert you from your liberal ways.
That's untrue. But it's ironic to me that the far right and the far left land in the exact same spot. If the far left gets what they want, if the far right gets what it wants, government is completely done away with, and the society looks exactly the same.
Well,
anarchy is anarchy, brother. Anarchy is anarchy. We can.
I view it as both the far left and the far right end up in totalitarianism.
I would say the far right and the far left end up in complete anarchy. The far left wants to completely do away with the common grace of government. Repealing, removing, taking back all this stuff. The far right is going to view it differently. The means to get there is going to be different. The journey to get there is different, but the destination is the exact same. No matter how they get there, and I could be wrong, people could debate me, and I would willingly retract. But
Wrong.
to get to anarchy, once you get to anarchy looks the exact same. You're going to have a few little militias that don't trust each other, that are forming up and taking over the people and coming up with the law as they go, which is terrible. And you're having just all out terrible stuff. Anarchy is awful. All that to say, though, anarchy is denounced by all Christians.
Yeah.
You don't have an issue with a certain governor or president or whoever it may be and believe that or have the alternative in mind of just having nobody in that place. That is terrible, and it's not what God intended. So we metaphorically have a head, but not univocally, to the point of this.
Yeah, that's the point. I don't know if you're ready to conclude question 17, but I like, he summarizes it well at the end. He says, hence that is a fiduciary power, as we've already discussed, a power of trust in which the thing put in trust is not either his own proper heritage or gift, so as he may dispose of it as he pleases, as men dispose of their goods or heritage, but the king may not dispose of men as men as he pleases, nor of laws as he pleases, nor of governing men, killing or keeping alive, punishing and rewarding as he pleases. He goes on to say, therefore, he has the trust of life and religion, and has both tables of the law in his custody, to see that other men than himself keep the law. But the law is not the king's own, but given to him in trust.
That's where it gets classic. That's where Lex Rex gets classic.
Yeah. So it's the law. The law is not the king's. That's the title of the book. That there's a law above the king. Rutherford's making a point in this chapter. It's given to the king in trust. It's not his. He doesn't get to determine morality, reality, right, wrong. It's his to execute. It's his to steward in trust, but it is not his. Going back, just a small point. This is where, piggybacking off of last week's conversation, this is where I would draw some disagreement with Rutherford, in that I would say that he doesn't have both tables of the law. He's in trust of one of the tables of the law,
which would be the second table of the law.
Yeah. Sins toward, governing toward a neighbor or society.
Yeah, but going back to what we said last week, the best governor, the best watchman, the best king is the one who acts and enforces the second table of the law while believing the first table of the law.
Well, right. By calling it the second table of the law, though, is implying this is the second table of the law of Moses given at Mount Sinai by the one triune holy God.
You're sharp today. That pre-workout.
Dude, it's Saturday mornings, dude.
Come on, man.
It's Saturday mornings.
Hey, it does change the feel.
We found our sweet spot, man.
It does change the feel of the podcast having on Saturday. I'm not in my work clothes. You didn't have a late meeting the night before because you're spending the night with your wifey and your kids. Yep. Quick little get to know the podcasters. D2 reserves his Friday nights for his family. Shout out to D2.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't help last night, guys, but my family hadn't seen me in like 2 weeks, so.
Hey, and we needed help. I wasn't even about to blow that phone up.
Oh, thanks, bro.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Come
Y'all are doing the heavy lifting around here. I'll give you all the credit.
We're doing the heavy lifting. You're doing the sleeping.
Yeah.
But no, those are good points, man. And if people, so far at least, if people don't get anything else from this, if they just get that summary at the end of that chapter that you just read, it directs our government in such a good direction. It leads to such good political theory.
Well, it gets to true leadership. I mean, this is essentially what I'm gleaning from Lex Rex, the most thing. What's the definition of leadership? What's the definition of authority? It's like you've got to have a standard by what you're saying. Is this a good king or a bad king?
Yeah.
And so this is what we're this is what we're talking about here. It's like, okay, what is good and right authority and what isn't? How do you know when you're supposed to oppose or be against something, or not? You can't just read headlines and determine what you feel about it. You've got to actually have a basis or a reason to, vote, endorse, support, or oppose.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a good point. And I think that we as Americans throw the word tyrant out too quickly.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? You're hesitant.
Yeah, I don't know. I just would want to make Rutherford's point, or I agree with Rutherford's point in that one act of tyranny doesn't call for the torches.
Exactly.
It doesn't call for the torches and pitchforks.
And that's why I'm saying that. That's why I'm saying that, because one act of tyranny does not make one a tyrant.
Yeah.
Because if we were to go to a Christian, and if I were to see you say a cuss word after you stub your toe, does that mean that you're a lost, unregenerate sinner? No. It's a silly analogy.
Yeah.
Silly analogy. But if I were to see Jeff Durbin on the stage say the BS word like he did, which everybody knows about, I totally disagree with that. Would I be able to say off of that one act that man is not a Christian?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So we shouldn't do the same with governors.
Right.
We see one oppressive act from a governor or a president, like our presidents. We see one act from a president. That is a tyrant.
Yeah.
Get the bit. It's like, no, absolutely not. Like, because Rutherford would not look at anyone in our land, I believe, at least, would look, well, I'm going to back up there. Rutherford would be slower to use the T word, tyrant, because he makes that point a few chapters earlier.
Yeah.
An act oftentimes can be separated from the essence, though acts do flow from essences.
Right.
And
he was living in a day. I mean, we can talk about our government and talk about failures in the breakdown of our system of government right now. But in Rutherford's day, the king had way more. The power was so much more centralized in the king than even we have today. In the United States. So we can talk about big government and the problems and things like that, and how they've got more power than the Constitution, actually intends. But they're still not. They're still. We don't have a phony government. In my view, there's still checks and balances. There's still things. Our president, still to a large extent, can't do whatever he wants.
Right.
Yeah.
And we see that with 86,000 IRS agents. We were like, oh, snap. If I get one dot on my tax return roll, I'm paying big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're strapped, too. You saw where they're strapped. The IRS agents are trained with guns. It's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
But that's repealed.
Yep.
They're taking that away.
Yep.
And so whatever side you land on, there's a great checks and balances in our government that Rutherford would applaud with his political theory.
Right.
Which is another way why Lex Rex shapes a Western government. Something that I was going to say to your point. I'll bring this up, but this is just a point in passing.
Now, I will say, though,
ask a question.
I will say, though, do I see very concerning trends in the wrong direction? Absolutely.
For sure.
And, our friend that we talked about a couple weeks ago, who's from another country that we're not going to name him or the country, he's saying, hey, watch out, open your eyes. Y'all are heading this way, even if you don't realize it as a whole.
Yeah. Which is why for Christians, a large community in the States to read Lex Rex and understand this is important. I would say is important because we're saying all this stuff like it's just easy to grasp. There's a lot of Christians that are going to read this or listen to this and completely disagree.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I would say for wrong reasons. But
Well, I'm still trying to figure it out, honestly.
yeah, there's not.
I mean, I had some convictions that lend me toward Rutherford's argument. It's not like I had zero views about politics or government, but I'm definitely learning while reading.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good work for us. And I had you bring up the point of what is a tyrant, what is a king, da 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 da. I had a long conversation with someone the other night, a serious conversation, a listener, who was really asking the question, what is a tyrant?
Right.
And it was based off of the quote on page 99 where Rutherford says, tyrants are not kings. They violate da-da-da. In their essence, they're to be removed.
Right.
And so that's something that I think would be good with our next guest that's coming on this next Saturday, who's a well-rounded guy, well-defined guy, for him to define what a tyrant is for people, lest we assume what that is, because that would lead in the wrong direction if we have bad definitions of this. But let me ask you the question, and this will lead us to question 18. This question goes back to our talk last week on our Baptist convictions when reading a Presbyterian, because you brought up last week that covenant theology probably is going to come into play at some point,
right,
in influencing our political theory, because we as Baptists understand the distinction more so than Presbyterians on Old Covenant and New Covenant. And I'm not going to get into a debate on covenant theology, so Presbyterian listeners, please don't get mad at me at this, and don't get fired up. It's like, hold me back. Is he about to say it? Is he going to say it? I'm listening. And the Presbyterian in the background, like, all fired up now. Say it. I dare you to say it. I'm not going to talk about your covenant theology. All I'm just saying is, because we are Baptists.
Please don't offend them.
It's, I love them. We have them on the podcast. But there's going to come a time where we may disagree with Rutherford because of those differences from the start.
Yeah.
So the question I have for you, based off of what Rutherford says on page 195, is the king or governor in our time to rule according to Deuteronomy chapter 17?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah, that's the question basically proposed in question 18. I would.
Could I just read the quote?
Deuteronomy 18?
17.
17?
Could I just read the quote real quick? On page 195. It is a vain thing to distinguish between the office and the power, going to the points you said earlier.
Right.
For the power is either a power to rule according to God's law as he is commanded, Deuteronomy 17, which there Rutherford is saying the king is commanded to rule according to Deuteronomy 17.
Right.
And this is the very office or official power which the King of Kings has given to all kings under him. And this is a power of the royal office of a king to govern for the Lord his maker. Or this is a power to do ill and tyrannize over God's people. But this is accidental to a king in the character of a tyrant and is not from God. And so the law of the king in this place must be the tyranny of the king, which is our very mind.
Yeah, so basically in this chapter, what he's doing is kind of contrasting Deuteronomy 17 with 1 Samuel chapter 8. So if you remember back, so in 1 Samuel chapter 8, the people are asking, we want a king like the other nations. And Samuel gives a warning from God, saying, okay, if you're requesting a king, this is how he's going to rule over you. And then he goes on to explain tyranny. he goes on and he's saying, look, be careful, basically be careful what you wish for. And what Rutherford's doing is opposing those who are the royalist again. He quotes Barclay a lot in this chapter because 1 Samuel 8 is used as to show from their perspective look, Samuel describes a bad king, a tyrannical king, but yet Samuel doesn't say that the people can or should oppose this king. There's just basically like you're stuck with him, and you need to endure that kingship, that tyrant, through patient prayer. And so, because it's showing that the king has been given, so to resist that king would be to resist God. Is essentially the royalist Barclay's argument. And Rutherford is going through in detail. He exposits, 1 Samuel 8, contrast it with Deuteronomy 17, and says, to oppose that idea and say no. 1 Samuel 8 isn't putting forth, that the king has any authority to do these things. It's a warning. It's saying no.
Exactly.
It's a warning saying be careful what you wish for. Not okay, but if the king does this, then you're stuck with him.
Right.
So he's differentiating that quote that you just read. That's not from God. Going back to one of the first points that Rutherford makes is that the description in 1 Samuel chapter 1 Samuel 8 and some in 12 is that that's not the law. That's not what's being put forth. There is not God's authority or anything remotely to the law of God. So it's not. So he makes that distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. In turn, though, is he to rule directly according to Deuteronomy 17?
Right. Yeah.
What would you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the alternative to that? What if you don't? Well, that's tyranny, and that's going to lead to tyranny. It's kind of naive to think that you can throw out, because in Deuteronomy 17, pretty fundamental things, which, of course, you do have some things in that text, to my recollection, talking about rewriting the Mosaic law according to a priest and stuff, that we see that Rutherford would say, especially if we're following the Westminster Confession, the 1689, that would be abolished, such as the reduplication of the civil Mosaic law in the land, which is included in Deuteronomy 17. So there are certain aspects of that were particular, using the language of the confessors, the framers, particular to the land of Israel. But
the
still,
nation of Israel, yeah.
But there's fundamentals in Deuteronomy 17 that you can't do away with.
Right.
And to do away with that is going to inevitably lead you to tyranny.
Right.
Is it tyranny or tyranny? Do you say tyrant or do you say tyrant?
I'm inconsistent. I say tyrant.
I think we're all inconsistent.
I say tyrant, but then I call it tyranny.
That's why I used to say tyranny, but it's tyranny. So why isn't that tyranny?
I wouldn't call it that if I were you, but hey, man, you do you.
Yeah.
New year, new you. Go for it.
And in this chapter, he's doing a bunch of exegesis on the passages that you mentioned, and then some. He's looking at...
Which is worth the read.
It is worth the read.
But it'd be... Yeah, we're not going to be able to go through it.
And then the next thing, too, though, and this is going to lead to the next chapter, or...
What? Real quick, another thing that Rutherford is combating here is that Barclay is trying to, I think he's referring to Charles Barkley, like the NBA player, the commentator. I think that's what.
He was alive back then.
Yeah. Basically, there's another argument that's trying to differentiate between the power of the judges that Barclay would say was more limited, and then the power of a king, so that the judges could be opposed because they weren't representing the power or authority of God, but kings should not or cannot be opposed. That's another that's me simplifying it, but that's another argument that the royalists are making, because they've got to make justification for why the judges were clearly opposed at points, but kings shouldn't be. On page 196, Rutherford says, now if the kingly power be from God, that which essentially and specifically constitutes a king must be from God, as the office itself is from God. Barclay says expressly that the kingly power is from God, and that same which is the specific form that constitutes king. So he's trying to, closely identify the power of a king to the very power of God. And he's, Barclay's making the point, must be that which, this must be what separates the king from the judge, if they be essentially different. I like how Rutherford puts it. He says, as Barclay dreams.
Yeah.
I highlighted a whole section in here where it's just a paragraph of insults. It's like, this is a paragraph of insults. I'm like, geez, like he's just going off in this paragraph.
Yeah.
Rutherford's rebuttal. This manner of law of the king to tyrannize and oppress, to be a power from God, and so a lawful power, by which you shall have this result of Barclay's interpretation, that God made a tyrant as well as a king. So that God, basically, this is ascribing evil to God. If you're going to hold this position, then you're saying that God intended, in a way, yet not to take away from the sovereignty of God, that, if a tyrant comes into power, it's out of his control. But there's a difference between the
revealed will of a king, and the decreed appointment of a tyrant.
Right.
The hidden.
And so God may permit a tyrant to come to power, but he's not, actively, promoting or assigning. So God's still sovereign, but he's not. But he does not sin, and he does not. He does not promote unrighteousness. Where from Barclay's arguments, that you've got to say, that's Rutherford's critique, is like you end up doing that. Rutherford goes on to say, by this difference that Barclay puts between the king and the judge might be resisted, for he had not this power of domination that Saul has, contrary to Romans 13:2, Exodus 22:28, 20:12. So Barclay's essentially making the point, it's like, well, the difference between a judge and a king is that, look at how dominant Saul was. Look at, the domination, the power given to Saul that no judge, no judge had within themselves. And Rutherford's just not buying it. Rutherford's saying, like, if that's your standard on what's a king and what's a judge, is his ability to, abuse power, then, he calls that argument weak.
Yeah. And blasphemous. He says on page 196, if then the judge and the king be both lawful ordinances, and if they differ essentially in that way that you just mentioned, the fact that the judge cannot be a lord and dominator, but in essence a king can be, as Barclay says.
Right.
If they are lawful ordinances in that way, then the specific form which distinguishes the one from the other, namely domination and a power to destroy the subject, must be from God, which is blasphemy. For God can give no moral power to do wickedly, for that is a license and a power to sin against a law of God, which is absolutely inconsistent with the holiness of God. For so the Lord might deny himself and dispense with sin. God averts such blasphemies.
Yeah.
So his way of saying that argument is weak is by calling it blasphemy against the character of God. These Puritans go in, man.
Yeah, yeah. Rutherford went hard in this chapter for sure.
There's a lot of Hebrew that's included.
Another point that's made. I mean, he's bringing up opposition and answer one after another. One of my favorite arguments that he makes is Barclay basically says, he basically says that, look, what God did there was the people were asking a ruler like the nations, like the other nations had. And he makes the argument where the other nations had an absolute ruler. And so that's what God gave them. The people were asking for a tyrant. And so God gave them a tyrant. Rutherford makes a point. He was like, no, they were asking for a king to avoid tyranny. They were asking for a king to avoid tyranny. Now, in this text, I do think that the people, because in Deuteronomy 17, God permits a king over Israel. I preached this a while ago. So I still don't have all my questions answered on, okay, now you have a people asking for a king. Why does God now tell Samuel to warn them against this request for a king?
I actually wrote a paper on that.
You did? Yeah,
I studied that question.
Yeah, I would really like to read it, honestly.
I'll send it to you.
And you can give kind of maybe a quick debrief here.
It's going to be expert debrief.
Yeah.
Expert level.
But,
it's a joke.
The conclusion that I came to is that, okay, a king was permitted, but there was an issue with their desire. There was an issue with the reasons that they wanted a king, is that they no longer trusted God. In 1 Samuel 8 in 1 Samuel 8, I think is where it is. That's where they're requesting a king. But remember, the context is that Eli was priest and judge, and his sons were, desecrating the temple. They were tyrants. They were taken from the people, doing immoral acts as priests in their priestly office as well. They weren't not ruling or judging righteously. And so the people are like, hey, we're done. Basically, we're done. We're tired of this system of judges. It really wasn't a system. It was just, the rise and fall of judges, this tumultuous political, time. And they were just like, okay, give us a king. They were wanting a ruler to escape the what was unjust ruler or tyranny, what we might call tyranny of Eli's sons that the Lord did kill, but they were like, okay, we're tired of this tumultuousness, basically, and they requested a king. So,
well, in that case, they're also looking at Samuel's sons, and that's in the text. It says the driving cause of them wanting a king was because they see Samuel's sons.
Yeah. Samuel's sons, not Eli's.
You're thinking of the priests in 1 Samuel 2.
Right.
But I get your point, yeah.
Yeah, it was Samuel's sons, not Eli's sons. Which that's odd, too, that you have Eli's sons go wicked, and then Samuel's sons weren't righteous rulers.
There's a parallel.
Rulers either. Yeah.
I think that's an intended parallel.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And so it's kind of a rebuke against Samuel in a way, because it's his sons that aren't fulfilling their calling, their duty from the Lord. And so now Samuel is being asked to appoint another ruler, a king, or that's who's the request is being made to. So, but Rutherford's point being, these people weren't saying, we want, please give us tyranny. They they were trying to avoid it. My interpretation of the text is what was taken issue with isn't necessarily the request for the king, but a motivation behind it, and that they weren't wanting a tyrant, but it was a lack of, they were now saying, okay, we're going to pick our own authority, we're going to pick our own ruler, for our good. They quit. I think it was motivated by lack of trust in the Lord. That's what was taken. It was the heart or motivation of the matter, not the specific request for a king or a more organized form of government. But I could easily be corrected on that because.
Yeah. That's a complicated
or informed.
Yeah, that's a complicated question, which is why I wanted to seek it out, write a paper on it for my historical books class for Old Testament. All that to say, for the prelacy to use 1 Samuel chapter 8 as an authorization for tyranny is completely odd. And Rutherford says,
not that they're necessarily promoting it, like this is what a king should do. They're clearly not doing that, but it's saying, hey, it's in their prerogative.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the law, right? That's what they're saying. And in 206, Rutherford says, can any believe Samuel would have written a law of tyranny and put that book in the Ark of the Covenant before the Lord to be kept to the posterity, seeing he was to teach both king and people the good and the right way?
Right.
I mean,
right.
1 Samuel 12 says he's to do those things. Would he really include 1 Samuel 8 in the perpetuity of kingship? Really? That doesn't make any sense at all. And so you can't look at 1 Samuel 8 and say that is in the very essence of a king.
Right.
Because, as you said earlier, no, it's not the identity of a king. It's the warning against the king that they're going to have.
Right.
So, and two, on top of this.
And I think it's a particular warning against Saul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is my findings in that paper. So some say, well, the problem that the error that the Israelites had in 1 Samuel 8 was that they wanted to select a king like all the other nations. Now, that's not the problem. Because if you look at Deuteronomy 17 as your framework for 1 Samuel 8, the Lord says, you may appoint a king like the other nations.
Yeah.
Meaning you may have a form of government like the other nations. You may have a monarchy like the other nations have. So there's the king of Sodom and Gomorrah in Abraham's time. There's the other five kings of the different.
Not the best example, but
pre fallout Sodom and Gomorrah. These other nations have this form of government. You may have that also. Deuteronomy 17.
Right.
So there's not the error there. I propose that the issue that the people have in wanting a king is the timing of them wanting a king.
But what I agree, and the point that I would make though is, okay, but why is their timing off? It's because they know they don't trust the Lord to provide them what they need when they need it.
Exactly.
They say, no, we're done with this. Give us a king.
Exactly. And that comes in the face of them being delivered from the Philistines in 1 Samuel 7 by God.
Yeah.
So in 1 Samuel 7, you see Samuel acting like, in a sense, prophet, priest, king.
Right.
He's doing all three duties.
Right.
And so the judge is the intermediary there of King Yahweh, and he's doing exactly that he needs. The Lord is providing for the people. Then the people get ahead of themselves. Oh goodness, look at Samuel's sons. We can't have these judges anymore, which judges never ruled in posterity. There was never
meaning
there was never a man born judge.
Right.
So they're looking at Samuel's sons, and they don't have to be discouraged by that because there's never a judge that is born a judge. So it's not like Samuel's sons are going to automatically take over as judge. Why are they losing faith in the kingship of Yahweh based off of the sinfulness of Samuel's sons?
Because they knew about Eli and his sons. That's why.
Yeah, but Eli and his sons were not going. The perpetuity of a priest is different from the perpetuity of a king.
Right.
And so the people are looking at the sons, and they have a valid reason. Okay, if these men are to rule over us, that's bad news. Let's appoint for ourselves a king. The second issue that the people have is how they appoint a king. By his looks.
Right.
By the power he
Right.
seemingly is going to give to us. Whereas we can't see Yahweh. We can't see any sort of guaranteed power that he's going to give us in the future, that we can look to the past and see his work.
Right.
Let us point for ourselves a king over us. And so they appoint for themselves a king after the desires of their own heart, which is where we get the phrase, David, a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
That's in contrast with Saul being a man after the people's own heart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And so they appoint for themselves a king instead of
the wrong
waiting.
king.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas I propose that David was always in the picture of being king over the people. He's not an accident to the situation.
Right.
He's not a
Right.
reaction of
He's
God.
not God's response to
Right.
Yeah.
He would have always been king, even if the people would always have been submissive to God's timing.
Right.
The Lord was going to appoint David. He was going to.
Yeah.
Because David is from the tribe of Judah. You see Genesis 49, the scepter shall never leave or depart the tribe of Judah.
Yeah.
And so if the Lord would have just...
Yeah, Christ being the greater David was always in view, in the view of God before Saul.
Exactly. So if Saul would have never have happened, David would have always happened either way.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of the people being obedient and patient or disobedient and impatient.
Right.
I think it's an issue of impatience, which reveals the reasons why they wanted a king.
That's good. That's good. That's good insight.
Which goes exactly with what you were saying. To shift gears, I know you didn't read chapter 19.
Let's
so
go.
You're not going to want to. Well, if you want to jump into that, and I think it's not a big stretch because it goes exactly with what we're talking about. Chapter 19, whether or not the king be in dignity and power above the people. You can read Rutherford's arguments in 1 through 18 and be able to guess what Rutherford is going to say in chapter 19. And especially with us talking about what we read in chapter 17, whether in dignity he be above the people, we've already mentioned that the king is actually servant of the commonwealth and not this different in essence, holier than thou, better than you, royalist over the people. And he says this. If the king, and I want to point this out, the clear answer is no, the king is not above the people in dignity.
Mm-hmm.
This untouchable.
Yeah, it's not, the king isn't this kind of different state, like different class or state of humanity. Is that the consistent point he's trying to make?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And
this is another area where he's already gone over this. And he's just layering it in.
Right. And one of these layers is this. So what about in the sight of God? So does God look at a king and give him excess favor as opposed to looking at T. Ford and saying, T. Ford is not a king. He's just the editor of Classic Cast. I'm going to choose the king over him in dignity.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is a direct contradiction to Scripture,
Right.
as Rutherford points out. He says on page 209, a king as a king, or because a king is not the inheritance of God, nor the chosen and called by God, nor the sheep or flock of the Lord's pasture, nor the redeemed of Christ, for those excellencies befit not kings because they are kings. For then all kings should be endued with those excellencies, and God should be acceptor of persons if he put those excellencies of grace upon men for external respects of highness and kingly power and worldly glory and splendor from many living images and representations of God, as he is holy or more excellent than a political representation of God's greatness and majesty, such as the king, because that which is the fruit of a love of God, which comes nearer to God's most special love. Man, full Puritan mode there, is more excellent than that which is farther removed from his special love. So if he's not this Christian, if he's not all these other spiritual things, he's just a king. And if the Lord look at those earthly dignities and say, oh, I show favor to this man because he's a king over this man.
Right.
He's showing partiality based off of earthly, worldly, temporal aspects.
Right.
And that's against God's character.
Yeah, God's not partial. This is what Paul's talking about in Galatians, where he says there is no Greek or Jew, slave nor free, male nor female. This is what he's talking about here, is that all are made in the image of God. So there's not one life more valuable or containing more dignity than another life. So no partiality of any form, ethnic, gender, or otherwise.
Right. And then the second thing, which this will answer the question in full. If a king is above the people in dignity, if you're getting line by line argumentation, the layers, it makes common sense to say that no, he's not above dignity in the people.
Right.
He's the servant of the people. He's been given to the people.
In trust,
entrusted with the law to rule over the people.
Yeah.
He is put in place as a positive law, as a gift to the people to establish law and order in society. And Rutherford makes this just common sense claim. He is a gift. He says this: those on 2:10, those who are given by God as gifts for the preservation of the people to be fathers to them, those must be of less worth before God than those to whom they are given, since the gift as the gift is less than the party on whom the gift is bestowed. You know, when someone gives a Christmas gift to another person, they never say that that gift that they are giving to the person is worth more than the person they're giving it to. They're giving that gift to the person because the person they are giving it to is worth way more than the gift that they are giving it to. I love you, so I'm giving you this book. I would never say that this book is worth more than what you are. God to the people, I'm giving you a king because I love you. He's never going to say, I love this gift more than I love you.
Right. That's a good analogy or metaphor Samuel Rutherford uses.
Yes. And he is giving the king to the people. The end of this transaction is the people.
Yeah.
As he would say on page 214, the king is the effect. The people are the end.
Right.
When you're given a gift, the end of your love is the person you're giving it to. The effect of your love is the gift itself, which is the king.
Right.
So again, going back, I know we need to conclude.
It's the means and ends. It's like, well, what's the objective here? What is the king for? The king is for the people. The people are not for the king.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to circle back around to the quote we opened up with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, say what you will about any governor. She hits the nail on the head by saying that fact that the king or the governor or government, as she says, is the servant of the people.
Yeah.
People are not the servant of government.
Right.
The government is a gift to the people. People are not a gift to the government.
And amen. From a Christian perspective, government is a gift.
Yes.
It
is a gift that we would nobody in their right mind would ever want to do away with.
A gift of God.
It's a great gift. The best gift that we as a common society can be given. Great positive law. Can't live life without it.
Yeah.
But it's a gift. And for that's a good starting point for a governor. You want to be a good governor? Understand that you're a gift to the people.
Yeah.
That's not going to lead you to a holier than thou conclusion. Not to, because you're a gift. You can be removed and another gift be given.
Yeah, the Bible also says things about, humility and those sorts of things.
Right.
So.
But to say that you're a gift,
you don't have to think you're the best thing since sliced bread.
Right. And to say that you're a gift, though, if you're understanding that properly, is to say that you are to make effects for the people, and that the people that you have been given to are so much more important than you are. Yeah. Not that you as a person, but you as an office.
Right.
Are.
Yeah. It's the idea of, it's just that idea of public service that you talked about. It's just like, hey, I'm in this role as, they view themselves as a actual public, servant, not an authoritarian, not a celebrity, not, the greatest thing, the greatest person to ever inhabit the office. And, look how great and what a blessing it is that, these people get to have me as governor. That's not in which that's not the spirit in which the Lord is has for rulers or governors or kings.
Right. Because then you start to elevate your dignity above the people, which again, if you're a gift that limits your dignity, it doesn't add to your dignity above the people.
I'm just so glad my wife has me as a husband. She is so blessed.
In chapter 20, I know that you need to leave, Danny. Chapter 20 is just, if our reader, I don't know about you. Do you want to spend the next 2 years in Lex Rex?
No.
We already have another sponsorship, already have another book lined up that I'm anxious to get to. Chapter 20, I'm not going to get into at all. It's just an expansion of what we're talking about with the difference in judges and kings. Because, as you pointed out so succinctly, the prelacy was trying to say, look, you can rebel against a judge. You can't rebel against a king.
Right.
We'll give you this little bit of space to say that, if a judge is bad, you can resist him. Don't you ever think about resisting the divine king.
Right.
And Rutherford's just saying, look, there's no difference in essence there.
Right.
He says this on 241, which is included in a social media post that we made this week. Just, again, classic. Makes Lex Rex classic. The judgment administered by all, judge or king alike, is God's. All are obliged to fear God. Doesn't say all are obliged to fear king. In fact, he puts all below God, whether you be judge, whether you be king, whatever you may be. All it's the same. It's all the same. So you want to riddle down the answer to question 20? If there's any difference in essence between judge and king? No. All are, the judgment and administered by all is God's. God gives the gift, every single gift, whether it be lower magistrate, which glory to God, we have a president, we have a governor, we have mayors, we have judges. Glory to God for all of those gifts to us. But all of them are gifts.
Yep.
None of them are on par with divinity.
Right.
The judgment administered by all is God's. 2 Chronicles 19:6. All, and this hits the nail on the head for all of it, all are obligated to fear God.
Yeah, they're all instruments. They're all in trust, operating in trust. Like chapter 18 opens up with. Question 18 opens up with. Yeah, I love the emphasis on the fear of God. That's the ultimate responsibility of every man, not just governors, kings, or rulers.
Right.
Man, this was rich.
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, we're hitting. Me too.
Well,
learning a lot. I think we're halfway in and hitting stride.
Yeah. We're about to speed it up, too. I mean, I counted this. And just to let you know, after this episode, if we stick with 4 chapters a week.
4 chapters a week. Okay.
Which I feel like is a good space.
Whether we, because I didn't read ahead because we didn't cover some stuff last week. So whether we formally get to it or not, we're trucking along with four chapters a week.
We can adjust. All
right.
My point isn't making that we have to do 4 chapters a week.
No. I'm for trucking through.
Because if we're reading
skipping chapters.
Well, but if we're reading through these things, we can get the summaries of some of these repetitions to give it to our listeners.
Yeah.
Get them the lean meat, cut the fat off.
Yeah.
That gives us 6 more episodes of Lex Rex.
Let's do it.
Which will then get us to our next book we already have lined up, which is to be revealed.
Let's do it.
CD and D2 coming at you, recorded and direct from the Classic Cast, where we just roll with it.
Real quick. I think you already mentioned this, but Classic Cast is now on social media. So
where are we at?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, soon to be YouTube, for those of you who like to watch your podcast. And also, D2, happy birthday, man.
Thank you,
D2,
sir.
happy birthday.
Thank you.
Hey,
thank you, guys.
Yeah. Also, a reminder, we have a full episode of D2 explaining his work with Grace Bible Theological Seminary in the past. Go check it out. Thank you.